In the summer of 1910, a traveling photographer named Malik arrived at a prosperous farmstead in the rural heartland. The property, known locally as Royal Oak Farm, belonged to Kameron and Anya, a respected couple who had built their lives through decades of hard work and careful stewardship of the land. The farmstead was more than just a home. It was a symbol of stability in a time when the world was changing rapidly. Kameron, a man of stern demeanor and few words, had inherited the property from his father and expanded it into one of the most productive farms in the county. Anya, his wife, managed the household with quiet efficiency, raising their children and maintaining the social standing the family had earned through years of community involvement. On that particular summer day, Malik set up his equipment on the front lawn. He carried a heavy glass plate camera, the kind that required careful handling and precise timing. The technology was remarkable for its era, but it demanded patience. Each photograph required a glass plate coated with a light-sensitive emulsion. The exposure time could last several seconds, during which every subject had to remain perfectly still. Even the slightest movement would blur the image, rendering it useless. Malik positioned the family carefully. Kameron stood at the center, his posture rigid and formal. Anya sat beside him, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Their children arranged themselves around their parents, each one instructed to hold their position without moving. The photographer worked methodically, adjusting the lens and preparing the plate. When everything was ready, he reminded them one final time to remain still. The shutter opened, and for 3 full seconds, the family held their pose. The light imprinted their image onto the glass plate, capturing a moment that would outlive them all. The photograph was developed, framed, and placed in the family home. For decades it hung on a wall, a testament to the family's heritage. It passed through generations, eventually becoming part of a larger collection of family records and historical documents. No one looked at it closely. It was simply there, a piece of the past preserved in sepia tones. Nearly a century later, a woman named Layton discovered the photograph while cataloging materials for the Dalton County Historical Museum. Layton was not a professional historian, but she had volunteered to help organize the museum's growing collection of local artifacts. The museum, housed in a converted schoolhouse, served as a repository for the county's collective memory. Its shelves were filled with old newspapers, handwritten ledgers, agricultural tools, and boxes of photographs donated by families who no longer had space to store them. Layton worked slowly through the collection, scanning each item and recording its details in a digital database. The photograph from Royal Oak Farm was among a batch of images donated by a distant relative of Kameron and Anya. At first glance, it seemed unremarkable. A formal family portrait, the kind that was common in the early 20th century. But as Layton scanned the image at high resolution, she noticed something unusual. In the background of the photograph, barely visible through one of the farmhouse windows, was a figure. It was not a trick of the light or a smudge on the glass. It was a distinct human shape, standing inside the house, looking out toward the camera. The figure was positioned in a rear window, far from where the family was posed. Layton stared at the screen, her curiosity turning into something closer to unease. She had worked with hundreds of old photographs. She knew the common flaws: dust spots, scratches, chemical stains. This was none of those things. The figure was too clear, too deliberate. She zoomed in further. The shape was shadowy, but the outline was unmistakable. A person standing still, watching. Layton contacted the museum's director, who suggested they consult an expert. The photograph and its original glass plate, which had been carefully preserved, were sent to a specialist named Elijah. Elijah worked as a digital forensic analyst, focusing on historical image authentication. His work involved examining old photographs to determine their authenticity and identify any anomalies that might explain unusual features. He had analyzed thousands of images, from Civil War battlefield photos to early aviation snapshots. When the glass plate from Royal Oak Farm arrived at his lab, he approached it with professional skepticism. The first step was to confirm the plate's authenticity. Elijah examined the emulsion under magnification, testing its chemical composition. The results confirmed that the plate dated to the correct period. It was an original 1910 exposure, not a modern reproduction or digital manipulation. The emulsion showed the expected signs of aging, and the glass itself matched the manufacturing standards of the era. This ruled out the possibility of contemporary tampering. The plate was genuine. Elijah then turned his attention to the figure in the window. He scanned the plate at extremely high resolution, creating a digital file that captured every microscopic detail. He analyzed the lighting, the shadows, and the optical properties of the glass window through which the figure appeared. His first hypothesis was reflection. Early glass windows were imperfect, often containing bubbles and distortions. Could the figure be a reflection of the photographer himself, or perhaps someone standing near the camera? He calculated the angle of the sun, the position of the camera, and the reflective properties of the window glass. The mathematics did not support the reflection theory. The angle was wrong. A reflection would have appeared at a different position in the frame, and it would not have shown the clear interior placement that the figure displayed. Elijah considered a second hypothesis: double exposure. Could Malik have accidentally exposed the same plate twice, once for the family portrait and again for a different scene? This was a common error among early photographers. However, the evidence contradicted this theory as well. In a double exposure, both images would show some degree of transparency or overlap. The family portrait was sharp and clear, with no ghosting or secondary images. A second exposure would have blurred the entire scene, especially with a 3-second exposure time. The figure in the window, while shadowy, did not exhibit the characteristics of a superimposed image. It appeared to be part of the original exposure, captured at the same moment as the family itself. With technical explanations exhausted, Elijah concluded that the figure was genuinely present during the photograph. Someone had been standing in that window, watching the portrait being taken. The question was no longer whether the figure existed, but who it was and why they were there. Layton, unsatisfied with the technical analysis alone, decided to investigate the historical context. She contacted Kane, a curator at the Regional Archival Institute. Kane specialized in local history and had spent years researching the families and communities of the county. He agreed to examine the case, intrigued by the combination of photographic evidence and historical mystery. Kane began by pulling all available records related to Royal Oak Farm. He found property deeds, tax records, and agricultural reports. He located census data from 1910, which listed every person living on the property at the time. The household included Kameron, Anya, their 4 children, and 2 hired workers. The workers were named in the records, along with their ages and places of origin. Kane cross-referenced these names with the photograph. All 6 family members were visible in the portrait, posed on the front lawn. The 2 workers were accounted for as well. They had been working in distant fields on the day of the photograph, confirmed by payroll records that noted their tasks and locations. No one else should have been in the house. Kane expanded his search to include visitors and temporary residents. He examined church records, school enrollment lists, and social club memberships. He found no evidence of anyone else staying at the farmstead during that period. The figure in the window did not match any documented individual, but as Kane dug deeper into the county's oral history collection, he found something unexpected. The Dalton County Historical Museum housed dozens of recorded interviews with elderly residents, collected in the 1970s and 1980s as part of a local heritage project. In several of these interviews, people mentioned a person they referred to as Harley. Harley was described as a reclusive individual who lived on the outskirts of the community. Multiple accounts mentioned that Harley had a habit of watching Royal Oak Farm from a distance, often seen standing at the edge of the property line or walking slowly along the road that bordered the farmstead. No one seemed to know where Harley lived or what connection they had to the farm. The descriptions were vague, but consistent. A solitary figure, often seen but never approached. Kane shared this information with Leighton. The oral histories provided context, but they raised more questions than they answered. If Harley was known for watching the farm from a distance, how did they end up inside the house during the portrait? Why would Kameron and Anya allow someone with such a reputation to be present during such an important family event? Kane suspected there was more to the story. He requested that Elijah conduct a final, more detailed analysis of the glass plate. Elijah agreed, using spectral imaging to examine the plate under different wavelengths of light. This technique could reveal details invisible to the naked eye, including faint images obscured by the normal exposure. The spectral analysis revealed a second anomaly. In the far background of the photograph, beyond the farmhouse and out in the open field, there was another figure. This second figure was much fainter than the one in the window, almost transparent. It appeared to be moving during the exposure, which explained its blurred and ghostly appearance. The figure was positioned at the edge of the property, looking toward the house. Elijah measured the position and compared it to the oral history descriptions of Harley. The location matched the areas where Harley had been reportedly seen. This second figure was likely Harley, watching the portrait session from the distance, just as the stories described. But if the figure in the field was Harley, who was the figure in the window? Kane returned to the archival records with renewed focus. He pulled every document related to Kameron and Anya, searching for anything that might explain a hidden presence in their household. He examined legal records, including court cases and property disputes. He found nothing unusual. Then he turned to family correspondence. The museum had a small collection of letters written by Anya to her sister in a neighboring county. The letters, written over several years, provided a glimpse into the private life of the family. Most of the letters discussed mundane matters: crop yields, weather, children's health. But in a letter dated 6 months before the photograph was taken, Anya mentioned a difficult situation. She wrote about someone she referred to only as Charlie. The letter was vague, but it hinted at a family conflict. Charlie was described as someone who had returned after a long absence, someone whose presence caused tension but could not be turned away. Kane cross-referenced the name Charlie with census records and found a match. Charlie had been a sibling of Kameron, estranged from the family years earlier due to a dispute over the inheritance of the farm. Charlie had left the county and moved west, disappearing from official records. But according to Anya's letter, Charlie had returned in early 1910, seeking reconciliation. Kameron had reluctantly allowed Charlie to stay in the house, but the relationship remained strained. The family did not acknowledge Charlie publicly, and there was no mention of them in any formal records from that period. Kane pieced together the timeline. Charlie was living in the house during the summer of 1910, but the family had decided to exclude them from the portrait. The photograph was meant to represent the official family, the one that Kameron and Anya wanted the community to see. Charlie, still considered an outsider despite their presence, was not invited to join the group on the lawn. But Charlie had been inside the house during the exposure, watching from the rear window as the family posed for their portrait. The blurred figure in the field, the one captured in the spectral analysis, was indeed Harley, the reclusive watcher observing from the usual distance. But Harley's presence now took on a different meaning. Harley had not been watching the family. Harley had been watching Charlie, the figure in the window. Kane found one final piece of evidence that confirmed his theory. In a later letter, written 2 years after the photograph, Anya mentioned that Charlie had left the farm again, this time permanently. The letter included a single cryptic line about Harley. Anya wrote that Harley had finally stopped appearing near the property after Charlie's departure. The connection was clear. Harley and Charlie had known each other. The exact nature of their relationship was lost to time, but the evidence suggested it was significant enough that Harley kept watch over Charlie from a distance, even as Charlie remained hidden inside the family home. The photograph, once a simple family portrait, had become a document of hidden lives and concealed truths. The camera had captured what the family wanted to forget. Charlie standing in the window, invisible to the official record but present in the moment. Harley watching from the field, a faint ghost in the background. Kane presented his findings to the Historical Society. The photograph was no longer just an image. It was a story of estrangement, of reconciliation denied, and of the ways families curate their own histories. The mystery had been solved not by discovering a supernatural explanation, but by uncovering the human complexity that the family had tried to erase. Layton arranged for the photograph to be displayed at the museum with a detailed explanation of the investigation. Visitors could see the original glass plate under magnification, along with the spectral analysis that revealed the second figure. The display included excerpts from Anya's letters and Kane's research notes. It became one of the museum's most popular exhibits, drawing people who were fascinated by the intersection of technology and history, by the way a simple photograph could hide such depth. The image itself remained unchanged. Kameron and Anya posed formally, their children arranged carefully, and in the background, barely visible, the figure that the family had tried to exclude, but the camera had faithfully recorded. The photograph had told the truth, even when the family had not. It preserved a moment that included everyone who was there, whether they were wanted or not. The camera did not judge or exclude. It simply captured what stood before it. The investigation had revealed the power of historical documents to hold more than their creators intended. Every old photograph, every faded letter, every forgotten record contained the possibility of discovery. The past was not fixed. It was constantly being reinterpreted, re-examined, and understood in new ways. The photograph from Royal Oak Farm was proof of that. For over a century, it had hung on walls and sat in boxes, its secret hidden in plain sight. It took modern technology and careful research to bring that secret to light. But the secret had always been there, waiting to be found. The figure in the window had been watching for over 100 years, patient and still, until someone finally noticed. The story of the photograph spread beyond the museum. Historians and genealogists began examining their own collections, looking for similar hidden details. People brought in old family photos, asking for analysis and research. Some revealed interesting details. Others remained simple portraits with no mysteries to uncover. But the search itself became valuable. It encouraged people to look more closely at their own histories, to question the narratives they had been told, and to recognize that every image contains more information than first appears. The photograph from Royal Oak Farm had taught a lesson about the nature of evidence and the importance of thorough investigation. It had shown that answers exist, even when they are difficult to find. The camera had captured the truth in 1910, and a century later, that truth had finally been understood.